Welcome to the Gray Art Gallery's virtual tour of Taking Shape, Abstraction from the Arab World, 1950s to 1980s. My name is Saga Beus. I'm a master's candidate in museum studies at NYU and a graduate intern at the Gray. Here you see the introductory text panel at the entrance to the exhibition. If you'd like to read the text, you will find it on the Gray's website at grayartgallery.nyu.edu. Images and object labels for every work in the show are also posted there. So if during my tour you spot a work that I don't talk about, visit the website for more information. To start, I'd like to note that all the works in Taking Shape are from the collection of the Barjeel Art Foundation, based in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. The exhibition includes nearly 90 works from North Africa, West Asia, and the Arab diaspora, and presents diverse approaches to abstract art in the post-war era, a period of decolonization, political change, war, and rapid industrialization. As you will see, many of the works on view explore national and cultural identity, drawing on pre-colonial culture in particular, and many reflect life during times of political conflict and uncertainty. Let's begin our tour with the 1968 painting at the right, an early work by Asma Fayumi entitled Requiem of a City. Fayumi was a leading Syrian abstract artist, and as you can see, she focuses on expressive gestural mark-making and bold lines and colors. Fayumi studied at the College of Fine Arts in Damascus, where students were encouraged to experiment with art-making materials and textures. In her work, she drew on her personal experiences and surroundings, and she was particularly attuned to her intuitive and emotional responses. We see this in Requiem of a City, where she captures the effects of war and political turmoil with thickly layered and textured strokes of paint applied with a palette knife. Fayumi's early work, including this piece, often references architecture and cityscapes. Her more recent paintings capture effects of the current conflict in Syria, with depictions of sheltering human figures rendered in her signature gestural style. Hanging on the opposite wall is an untitled work of 1978 by Madiha Umar. Umar is widely considered the first artist to explore the possibilities of Arabic letterforms as a visual language, which she did in both her art and her writing. She became part of a loosely defined movement called Hurufiyya, meaning letterism, comprising artists who employ Arabic letterforms and calligraphy in their work. Umar began to use letterforms in her art after studying Arabic calligraphy, which for her, as for many artists in the show, represented an artistic language that was both intrinsically Arab and modern. Umar's work leans more towards the use of letters as purely aesthetic forms. Around the corner are more works incorporating Arabic letters, by two Sudanese artists, Ahmad Shabrain and Ibrahim El-Salahi, and an Iraqi artist, Shakir Hassan Al-Said. At the left is a work called The Last Sound, which was painted by Ibrahim El-Salahi in 1964, after his father's death. The title refers to the sound of a soul, passing from this world to the next. Radiating lines at the work's center reference Sufi rituals, which often involve circular patterns. Many of the artists in the exhibition were inspired by Sufism, an ascetic and mystical strain within Islam. Looking closely at this work's details, notice how El-Salahi incorporates recognizable forms, such as birds, the contours of an African mask, the bird-shaped neck of a stringed musical instrument, bells, and legible text derived from prayers for the dead. Like other Sudanese artists of his time, he brought together in this one work Islamic symbolism, African art forms, text, and transnational modernism, manifesting the hybridity and cultural layering that reflects Sudan's cultural diversity. Now we are entering the gallery devoted to gestural abstraction. On this wall, you see 3 works that combine elements of French-style Impressionism and post-war gestural abstraction. The 2 at the left were painted by Abdallah Ben Antur, and they are called, left to right, Two Monet Giverny of 1983 and The Garden of Sadi of 1984. At the right is Jordanian artist Hine Nasser's painting Ayla from 1975. Ayla is perhaps named for the ancient Jordanian city of Eilat, now known as Aqaba, and it reflects Nasser's interest in nature and local landscapes. Although Ayla is abstract, it also evokes the subtle tones found in the sky at sunset or sunrise. At the left, gestural yellow lines evoke branches or leaves reflected in water. Nasser studied under Faralnissa Zaid, whose work is in NYU's Abbey Reed Gray collection of modern Middle Eastern and Asian art, and was also on view in the Gray's previous exhibition, entitled Modernisms, Iranian, Turkish, and Indian Highlights. Throughout her career, Nasser has served as a linchpin of the arts community in Jordan, promoting both art education and local crafts. Now let's turn our attention to Abdallah Ben Anter's Two Monet Giverny of 1983, painted in homage to the French Impressionist artist Claude Monet in his garden in Giverny, which is referenced here in the abstracted water lily shapes that dot the painting. Born and raised in Algeria, Ben Anter spent many years in France, working as a painter, printmaker, and art professor. He studied art history, and was especially drawn to painting landscapes, which demonstrate his keen sense of observation. In both his teaching and his writings, he strongly advocated for abstraction in art at a time when the post-colonial Algerian government was issuing decrees that art should be figurative and support the goals of the state. Leaving Ben Anter behind, we're now moving toward the central gallery, which is devoted to works incorporating Arabic letter forms, including many works from the Hurufiyya movement, which we briefly discussed in talking about Madiha Umar's untitled work near the beginning of the tour. On this wall, you see a series of silkscreen prints by Kamal Bulata that exemplify his bold and vibrant approach to making geometric prints and paintings. Let's zero in on 2 of these works, both dating from 1983. The first one we'll talk about is The Manifest the Hidden, its title derived from a phrase in the Quran. For his Arabic lettering, he chose the ancient squared-off Kufic script, which is often used for sacred Quranic texts. While this work incorporates a complete phrase in Arabic, Bulata deliberately complicated it to the point of illegibility. This approach reflects his interest in the mystical aspect of Sufism, which emphasizes contemplation of hidden mysteries as a path to knowing God. Here we see Bulata's "In the beginning was the Word," its title taken from the Bible, from the opening phrase in the Gospel of St. John. Notice how Bulata used a grid system to organize this composition. He was raised as a Christian Palestinian, and early on he was trained to paint traditional religious icons using a grid system. He loved mosaics, which also form grid patterns. Like all the silkscreen prints on this wall, this one displays a vividly colored, hard-edged graphic quality that references Western art movements such as pop art and color field painting. This image offers a sweeping perspective on 3 of the rooms we're visiting on this tour. At the right is the gallery we recently visited, the one devoted to gestural abstraction. In the center is the wall with Bulata's screen prints, which is part of the central Hurufiyya section. At the left is the entrance to a gallery containing geometric abstract works, which we're about to enter. We're now in the room devoted to geometric abstraction, which features the only sculpture in the exhibition and reflects the diversity of approaches to hard-edged painting found in the Arab world. The sculpture, entitled Interform and dated 1960, was made by Saloua Rouda Choucair of Lebanon. Like her painting Composition in Yellow, which hangs on a nearby wall, and which we'll talk about in a minute, Interform reflects her interest in architecture, geometry, and spirituality. Note her choice of dark-stained wood as medium, the better to reflect, bend, and twist the light that plays around, in, and out of her forms. Note too how she skillfully incorporates both biomorphic and geometric elements, perfectly blending them into one unified composition. On this wall, Choucair's Composition in Yellow, which we'll get back to shortly, is juxtaposed with two works by Jafar Isla, which you see at the left. Here at the left is Isla's Colors with Black and Gray of 1967, which references the flat-woven kilim rugs of Western Asia. Isla cited kilims as evidence that abstraction is not only not uniquely European, it did not even originate in Europe. As he points out, abstraction in art has deep roots throughout the non-Western world. On the right is Isla's The Void from 1967, which typifies his minimalist paintings. A member of the first generation of abstract artists in Kuwait, he was deeply interested in philosophy and mathematics, and his work draws inspiration from ideas such as less is more and 0 is the biggest number. While the void appears extremely minimal, the black planes are in fact made up of around 20 different tones, which become more apparent when you examine the work more closely in person. Since it's impossible to capture these subtleties in a digital image, you'll have to take my word for it. Now let's explore Saloua Rawda Choucair's composition in yellow of 1962 to 65. Not only is Choucair widely considered Lebanon's first abstract artist, she also had a background in science and mathematics. In her work, she combines these elements with her religious beliefs and her interest in Islamic art and history. Here she layers and interlocks various geometric shapes in bright, primarily yellow-toned colors, punctuated with a flat patch of black. Like other women artists in the exhibition, Choucair began to achieve recognition in the West only later in life, in her case with a solo exhibition at Tate Modern in 2013. Now let's round the corner to view two vibrant paintings by Saliba Douai, a Lebanese artist who grew up in the Maronite community, and whose early training was in traditional figurative painting. Here you see Douai's paintings double hung at the left. Seeking to develop his art, he moved to New York, where he met Mark Rothko, Hans Hofmann, Ad Reinhardt, and other artists whose abstract works made a deep impression on him. While in New York, he established a base in the Maronite Church of Our Lady of Lebanon, and painted murals and designed stained glass windows for Maronite churches on the East Coast. At the same time, he made abstract paintings such as these, which reference landscape. Around the corner from Douai's works are two paintings by Samia Halabi that exhibit her unique approach to art making. At the left is Halabi's white cube and brown cube of 1969, and at the right is her two diagonals of 1968. At first glance, they appear entirely abstract, but in fact they are also representational. Halabi created still lifes with stacked boxes and cylinders, and then rendered them in a way that makes them appear flat, while also throwing out tantalizing hints of volume and depth. Now we're leaving the gallery devoted to geometric abstraction, and again passing through the central gallery containing works inspired by Arabic letter forms, several of which by Madiha Umar, Ibrahim El Salahi, and Kamal Bulata we talked about earlier in the tour. This wall features works from North Africa, specifically from Algeria and Egypt, including at the right two paintings by Mohamed Khada, who is a central figure in the development of Algerian modern art. His work often incorporates earth tones, along with writing and calligraphy, as seen here in green abstraction and green abstraction on orange background, both dating from 1969. Khada was strongly committed to decolonization and was a founding member of Algeria's National Union of the Visual Arts. He also belonged to the School of the Sign art movement, which embraced the use of Arabic letter forms. Now we are rounding the corner and entering the large gallery that's primarily devoted to the Casablanca school. At the left, you see two striking, colorful works by Mohamed Melehi, and on the right is Mohamed Shabaz's wood relief composition of circa 1970. Both artists were from Morocco, and both belong to the Casablanca school. The term Casablanca school has two different meanings. It refers to a group of artists who focused on rooting Morocco's modern art firmly within the country's own cultural history. The term is also shorthand for the Casablanca School of Art, the country's main art training institution, which abolished the previous French academic-based curriculum in an attempt to decolonize the program. Its instructors promoted the use of local Moroccan art practices, such as weaving, ceramics, and woodworking, the use of materials found in the Moroccan landscape, and the use of imagery drawn from local Amazigh culture. Many of its professors were artists who belonged to the Casablanca school collective. Note that Amazigh is the name preferred by North Africa's indigenous, formerly nomadic tribes that were previously called Berber in the West, a term applied by colonial overlords. Today the term Berber, which is derived from the term barbarian, is considered pejorative, so it's best to use Amazigh. Now we are approaching the longest wall in the Casablanca School section, which presents diverse approaches to art making. Next I will talk about the work that is positioned second from the right. Note its relative size in relation to the other works on the wall. When we move up close, we'll see it has a precise, almost miniaturized imagery that calls to mind a manuscript illustration, but made abstract. The work is entitled Aube, which is the French word for dawn, and was created by Farid Belkahia. To make it, he used traditional Moroccan materials, painting it on vellum using local pigments such as saffron and henna. The rainbow-haloed black circle represents the rising sun. Looking closely at the details, notice the ambiguous, semi-abstract forms referencing male and female body parts. Now we're going to examine works by two Amazigh artists from Morocco. Jalali Garbawi's 1969 composition is deeply rooted in his native Amazigh imagery. Its black lines, for example, are directly inspired by the famous Amazigh facial tattoos. Hanging at the left is a work by another Amazigh artist, Ahmed Cherkaoui. He titled this work Alea after the Tifinagh letter meaning free man, which it incorporates and which appears on the Amazigh flag. Tifinagh is a script used to write the language of the Amazigh people. Dominating one wall in this room is a large series of prints by Lebanese artist Hussein Mahdi, who worked in a variety of media, including sculpture, painting, and graphic design. Each of the 30 etchings in the series incorporates an Arabic letter or word that Mahdi abstracts to create a striking visual alphabet. Here we see a close-up of one of Mahdi's etchings, with its bold calligraphic lines enclosed in a circle. Now we're moving toward and down the flight of stairs leading to the Gray's lower gallery. Hanging at its foot is a work by Etel Adnan, one of Lebanon's best-known modern artists, who is also an esteemed poet and essayist. After beginning her art studies in Lebanon, Adnan spent much of her time in Northern California and Paris, where at age 95 she currently lives with her lifelong partner, artist Simone Fatal. We'll be looking at a work by Fatal in a few minutes. This work by Adnan is entitled Autumn in Yosemite Valley, and it dates from 1963 to 64. Throughout her lifetime, Adnan has focused primarily on abstractions inspired by landscape. Note here how her stacked blocks of color evoke the warm, vibrant colors of the fall season. Now we're slowly moving through the Gray's lower level gallery, panning across the works on display, progressing toward our eventual target, which is in a corner of the last room. To the left on this wall, you see works by two of the three Lebanese women artists I'm now going to talk about, all of whose work centers around abstractions based on the human body. Of these works, Huguette Calan's 1971 Bribes de Corps, or Body Parts, is the most overtly representational, retaining a recognizable figurative element even as the artist pushes it toward abstraction. This piece, which is part of a series, is typical of Calan's art, which is steeped in bold colors and sensuous depictions of the human body. While Calan was living in Paris in the mid-1970s, the French couturier Pierre Cardin saw her wearing a caftan of her own design and invited her to collaborate with him on a caftan collection. Holland's large graphic sketches of nude female body parts splashed across Cardin's body-concealing garments are, like this work, both humorous and provocative. Hanging to the right of Caland's piece are Afaf Zuraik's two 1983 human form paintings, which reference the female body in their soft, shadowy brushstrokes. Zuraik based these works on close-up drawings of her own fingers, hands, neck, and shoulder, which she made while alone in her studio. All Zuraik's work is imbued with her absorption in relationships between light and shadow, solitude and darkness, inflected by her experiences during the Lebanese Civil War. Zuraik holds a BA in Fine Arts from the American University in Beirut and an MA in the History of Islamic Art from Harvard. She often finds inspiration in music and poetry, and has published several volumes of poems and memoirs. Now we are arriving at the last work on the tour, Simone Fattal's Celestial Forms of 1973, which occupies the central spot in this image. Here's a close-up of Fattal's work, which reflects her deep interest in nature and in the human form. Soft, billowy shapes in pale green, blue, and pink are outlined by dark pink shadows. At first glance, they resemble soft, cotton candy-like clouds, but upon closer examination we can make out contours of the human body. Like that of her lifelong partner, Etel Adnan, whose Autumn in Yosemite was the first work we saw on the Gray's lower level, Fattal's involvement as a writer and publisher, her background in philosophy, and her knowledge of Arab history and literature are reflected in her diverse body of work. Now we are nearing the conclusion of our tour. As we exit through the lower gallery and then proceed back up the stairs, let's take some time to reflect on the exhibition as a whole, and on the tremendous scope and diversity of abstract art in the Arab world. From the use of Arabic letter forms as a purely formal element, as in the work of Madiha Umar, to the graphic arrangement of actual phrases in the screen prints of Kamal Bulata, to the layered cultural imagery of Ibrahim El-Salahi, to the abstracted human forms of Huguet Caland, Afaf Zuraik, and Simone Fattal. Arab abstraction encompasses a kaleidoscope of approaches that were heavily influenced not only by the larger contexts of war, political turmoil, and modernization, but also by the artist's own personal experiences and their explorations of cultural history and identity. Thanks for tuning in. This is your guide, Saga Beus, signing off. I hope you enjoyed my virtual gallery tour of Taking Shape, Abstraction from the Arab World, 1950s to 1980s. To learn more about the exhibition, visit the Gray's website at grayartgallery.nyu.edu. Sign up for our listserv at the bottom of our homepage, or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at NYU Gray.